Welcome. Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. This is the beginning of Putting in the Work, how creatives are making D&I happen. So we want to welcome everyone for joining us this morning. Thank you for spending your morning with us. This is going to be a really interesting conversation, and I'm glad to be able to see so many very cool and welcoming faces today because we're going to get into some practical ways that creatives in town are making D&I a reality in their organizations. So we are going to look at several real examples of that and then have some discussion surrounding it. We also really encourage everyone to jump in with your own examples, your own stories, your own journey, your own questions about D&I surrounding the creative space. This is essentially kind of a think tank to be able to help us explore ideas that you can implement in your own organizations or tell others about, so that we can really do this D&I work. There's been a lot of talk that's a buzzword now, diversity, everyone wants to be a part of that, but a lot of people know that it's important, but are not necessarily sure how to start or what to do. So that's what this conversation is about this morning. We want to surround you with lots of great ideas that you can implement, albeit say free ideas that you can implement to begin to integrate diversity into your creative efforts. Just a few housekeeping items. We welcome you to ask questions throughout the presentation. There's no set question and answer period at the end. This is an organic discussion from beginning to end. So if something is mentioned and you have a comment or question, please feel free to unmute yourself and speak. We do ask that if you are not speaking, that you are on mute. Also, if you're uncomfortable with asking something in front of the group or commenting and you want to do that privately, you can do that in the chat where everyone can see, or you can privately chat myself or Melissa. I think I'm listed as AF in my little note, but Melissa Werman is actually steering the ship as far as our visuals and letting people in the communications. So if you want to bring something into the group and just share with her privately so she can ask your question, go ahead and privately chat with her and we'll make sure that it's included in the conversation. And we really want to stress that this is a safe space. Okay, so there is no judgment here. There are no stupid questions. There are no inconsiderate answers. We ask that you just simply respect everyone. We're all adults. We know how to do that. But please feel comfortable in that whatever you ask, there is nothing that you can ask that's not relevant to this conversation. Please feel free to express yourself however you feel. If you're unsure about something, if you want more clarification, please let us know and we will embrace you. I mean, there's nothing that you could think to yourself honestly and not be able to share with us. We welcome all of your feedback. So today we're going to be discussing 4 types of DEI methods that creatives have used. And in my previous experience, one topic launches us into an organic and rich discussion. So we might not get through all 4, but we're going to attempt to do the best that we can. And where we land is where we land. There might be a part 2 of this then if we don't get through everything, because I really believe that these tactics that these organizations have used can be easily used on your end as well. So we want to get through as much as we can. We also are pulling the examples that we use primarily because these places started from a place that wasn't super diverse, and they are now making moves to start from almost zero. So I think that provides a lot of context and a lot of encouragement that you don't have to have something in place in order to begin. You don't have to be far along in order to continue to move forward or implement new ideas. So we wanted to make sure that these examples were really encouraging and inspirational. So let's move on to our first method.
All right.
So the first tactic that we're going to explore that some companies in town have used is they've updated their strategic plan to reflect specific goals that they want to achieve with DEI. And our first example we're going to look at is the Arts Commission. And so the Arts Commission actually created this plan in 2015, I believe, and has been implementing it throughout that time period. But we really wanted to highlight their documentation of their goals. They put what they were thinking, planning, wanting to do into words that they can then put into action. And I think that that's really important to note because a lot of times we'll brainstorm around the conference room table, or we'll have impromptu conversations around the office, and everyone will say, well, that would be a great idea if we could do X, Y, and Z. But until it comes out of your head and onto paper, it's still just an idea. And so making sure that something is in your strategic plan not only shows you and provides you with a compass as to what to do or how to do it, but it forces you to kind of think deeper, not just about the big vision idea, but actually how that idea would become a reality. What steps are needed? Who needs to be involved? What outside or external entities need to be involved in order to make this happen? So as you can see here, in the Arts Commission strategic plan, they not only identified what they wanted their outcome to be, which is very important. Where do you want to end up? Where do you want to land? But they also did strategic actions that will lead to that outcome. So how do you determine what the problem is in order to be the solution to that problem? Well, in their particular plan, they talk about identifying demographic characteristics of Toledo. Who is where? You know, what audiences aren't being served? What audiences surround the Arts Commission itself? Where are the biggest needs or the biggest groups that could benefit from collaboration with the Arts Commission? They also identified other external groups that work with the groups that they want to touch or reach. So they talk about partnering with other agencies that champion for employment equality, or other organizations that have their target group, those that they haven't been communicating with or interacting with. Where do those groups of people, what do they belong to? What community organizations are they already interacting with? Who is reaching that target audience? And how can the Arts Commission collaborate with that organization to work smarter, not harder? Even within AAF, we have been doing more of a focus on connecting with groups. So if you say, I'd like to be more in touch with the African American community, or the Hispanic community, or the disabled community, or what have you, you can say, well, these groups connect with these particular organizations in town. You know, so there's groups that are specifically aligned with the African American community. Church is normally a big part of the African American community. If you partner with those organizations, they then will tell the groups that they're already connected to, and they can help push the message for you. So instead of putting so much pressure on yourself to go out and make direct connections with every single individual in these other groups, partner with a group that's already talking to those people. Mm-hmm. Then you can come up with a bigger strategic vision for that. Any thoughts about that, Melissa?
Yeah, you know, I think the Arts Commission in general just does like a badass job of all this stuff, because I mean, even, you know, myself, a self-employed designer, I don't have a strategic plan per se. I'm not like, I don't really have a good outlet to hire people of diverse backgrounds, since I'm not hiring anybody. But I use art. I mean, their art loop, things like that. I mean, even just me personally, I like to bring my children there. The last time we went to Art Loop, we got to see like a step group. We got to see like some Indian, like Bollywood dance group, like, and it's like, not just for my personal life, but it's like, I pull so much inspiration in the design that I work from, like chatting with the like cool muralists that are doing stuff that are completely out of my little bubble here in small town, you know, outside of Toledo. So they do such a great job in it, and it trickles down in a million different ways that we could bring DEI and just multiculturalism into our work. So it's one of those things that, I mean, it probably checks a lot of the different boxes of things that we can do, but just surrounding yourselves and like pushing yourself to go to, we also love to go to that, the international festival over at the mosque, like we've gone 3 or 4 years in a row, just pushing yourself to meet new people. And the Arts Commission really like plays this up in their strategic action and like what they do and the artists that they represent and they push out in the community. So if you can't make a strategic plan for it necessarily, or do hiring of people, there's still ways that you can benefit from these organizations that do. So
excellent point. Excellent point, because just because you're a one person show, when you say the word strategic plan, and I include myself in this because I freelance also, we think that it's this huge big picture thing that's only for major corporations, right? You can have a plan just for your own individual self. You can have a plan as a freelancer, and that plan does not have to be step 1 to step 876. That plan could be step 1, 2, and 3. 1, I'm going to look up other entities in town that have something going on that I can attend. Maybe I can bring my family, like you said, Melissa. Maybe I can bring a friend. Maybe I can go by myself and not feel awkward or pressured into, presenting who I am. A festival or things like that introduces you in an easy and fun way to these other groups and environments, and then you'll meet somebody. I ran into Melissa at that art loop. We both be there, and we ran into each other. So imagine how many other organizations, entities that you can run into. Also, like you said, those bigger community events like that Arts Commission, they plan it and execute it. Now we can benefit from it, right? So they've brought all the people together. Now we can go and meet those people and see the array of people that are doing things. And then you can individually introduce yourself. Hey, I work for XYZ, or I freelance for this, or I'm involved with that. Could I have your contact information? We might need a performance act to come and do something here or there. The networking that comes from that. I think that's the reason why, like for larger organizations, especially, Arts Commission is putting that in as one of their strategical actions, is to bring larger groups together, because sometimes smaller groups don't have the same reach. So when a strategic plan is being talked about, you can adjust that to your makeup. If you're a small organization that employs a couple people, if you're a larger organization that has more pull and influence in town, if you're a freelancer and it's just you, that doesn't mean that you don't have the ability to plan and make introducing yourself to other people intentional in your daily work or actions. And that's what the Arts Commission here has kind of shown us. They've had a larger plan because they have bigger partners and a larger reach, but taking this as a cue, you can do the same thing with your own personal plan.
Bingo. Well said.
And I'm starting to do that with my own personal self. Yep, we can go to the next one.
No,
Metro Parks is also
you don't need a
that.
strategic plan for your company. It's like, come up with your personal strategic plan or your career strategic plan, or even like the work that, like if you're a designer, like the work that you do, like 1000%, like the work that I've chosen to take on and the way that I've interpreted some of that has changed from different, like, things that I've interacted with, whether it's the arts loop or whatever. So like my work has completely changed in the last 5 years, just being aware of these initiatives and being aware of these stories that I hear that are just, too amazing to.
It changes your perspective. I mean, I'm telling you, the more that you're exposed, the more that your eyes are open and your mind is expanded to what the possibilities can be. And that's the reason why we're doing this talk today. I think that a lot of people assume that you're responsible for coming up with the solution that ends all discrimination, just you. You know what I'm saying? It's like, that is totally unrealistic, right? So if we think about what really will bring about change, it starts with you. It starts with you, the individual, right? So having a personal plan just for life in general is a good idea. And whatever it is that you choose to accomplish, think about how a different or new mix of people can enhance that plan. And from there, you can start to think about where that would fit in. And I also wanted to shout out that Crystal Phelps had chat with us, and she said that you can feel free to contact her. She left her email in the chat, and that she said that with the Arts Commission, she is there. Are you marketing director, Crystal? Yes. All right. So she is the marketing director for the Arts Commission. She is ready and available to be a resource for any connection to the Arts Commission or what they're doing. So we thank you for being on the call, Crystal, and thank you for offering your support there. So let's look on to the next example for the strategic plan, and that's through the Metro Parks. So I like the Metro Parks here too, because they're looking at more diversity in their audiences, the people that visit the parks. So you can also think too about Arts Commission focused a lot on diversity, of course, in the arts community, in the population, but in their staff. Metro Parks is looking a lot at their audience. So people who visit the parks, people who interact with their different exhibits and features. I liked how they listed as their first strategic action to become active members in diverse community groups and professional organizations. So you also don't have to be the person that cultivates everything. You can find out what's going on in other places and go there and support their initiatives to network, to increase diversity in town. If you have a specific target that you're trying to reach, or you're just trying to expand your horizons, again, when you find those groups that interact with those audiences, you don't necessarily have to start off with this super formal, professional, hey, I'm a part of this, I want to collaborate with you, I want to do this event or whatever. Go to a meeting of theirs. Just show up at something that they did. And you can integrate yourself in that way where it's not so much pressure. I think I'm addressing pressure. I'm focusing on that because I hear a lot of conversations that I have with people that there's this kind of pressure to know already, or pressure to be able to have the right answer all the time, or to know these different groups in and out, or have to research everything yourself to be knowledgeable before you're able to take a first step to speak or talk or whatever. And it doesn't take that. To be honest with you, every marginalized group, every group that has probably been historically excluded, would just welcome seeing a new face with whatever they're doing. If that's a, hey, I saw you guys do XYZ, you know, this is a really good thing for the city, congratulations. If it's a attendance at their event or a meeting, if it's a email to just say, hey, I'm just looking to get into something new and different, can you tell me a little bit about yourself or what have you? Those small steps you might initially think are insignificant or not good enough or what have you, but please don't discount that. That is exactly what it takes in order to break some of the barriers and some of the wedges that have been driven between us. It just takes a genuine interest in wanting to know what other groups are doing. And that can be followed through with just a simple attendance at a meeting or event. They also talked here about a think tank where they invited diverse leaders to come and meet. So we're going to get in this a little bit later on too, but like getting feedback on your offerings from people outside of your normal target audience is a great way to kind of know where you're standing in the public eye, right? So if I wanted to reach, I don't know, doctors or the medical field. That doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what I do now, but maybe they might be a lucrative connection for me or introduce me to something that I do want to be a part of. I gotta think about what it's like to be a doctor, right? I gotta think about where they go and what they do and assess that. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know those things off the top of my head. I have no context for that. I have no experience with that. It doesn't make sense for me to say, okay, well, this is what I think doctors do, and this is where I think doctors go. I need to ask a doctor. That can then give me firsthand information about where to go, what to do, how my offerings align or don't align currently with what doctors are into. Same thing with diversity. When you're thinking, especially about your strategic plan, whether that be personal or professional or corporate, think about asking a focus group or a group for feedback that are members of those audiences that you have yet to reach, because it's nothing like hearing it from their mouth. And I'm gonna tell you, it'll surprise you. I'm sure some of the feedback will be something that you probably hadn't even thought about or considered. And there's nothing wrong with that. We got to get past that, oh man, I should have known. That makes me feel ashamed. You got to get past that part, because the reason why diversity is needed is because we've been kind of purposely segregated. And we got to acknowledge that. whatever state you're in right now, wherever position you find yourself, it's because society has been set up for hundreds of years to be that way. We're just now taking the steps to explore the opposite of that, to get an opposite effect. So when you think about your next step or next move, don't be afraid to reach out to those who are members of the groups that you want to interact with to get firsthand accounts, so that you're not just making something up. And then if it doesn't work, blaming yourself. Putting steps in place so that you can get authentic interaction. Anything there you want to touch on, Melissa?
I was just going to say, it's really hard to do that. Like last year is a good example. Like when the Toledo Opera were like, we want you to do this poster for Blue, like the story about the African-American child who was shot at the hands of the police. I was just like, I was kind of frozen in terror. I was like, there's no way I'm going to do this justice. And then when I did it, I remember going to the opera and they were like, we love it. I'm like, okay, well, you're also white. So like, can you please vet this to, like, I know you have board members of color. Like, I need you to vet this with them before I make some kind of like, cause I've got like the Black Lives Matter, like in the background. And like, there's a lot of like things that I'm like, I think this is good, but like, I'm a white woman who has not lived that experience. So please vet this to all the people that can tell me where I've gone wrong if I have. And of course they took it another step. They're like, oh, we'll just send it to the composer, which I was like, okay, that's a lot of pressure. But so it ended up being good, but it was just one of those moments of like, I think this is doing it, but like, I don't know, because I have not.
And that was a teaching moment for you too, right?
Well, and I also didn't want this to be revealed to the public and then screw it up for the opera and have something that it's like, well, that was a misstep, you know, like you have to approach these experiences as a learning and education, and be humble and be able to take that criticism and take that risk and say, I'm putting this all out there, but please help me do better. You know, you have to give people that opportunity to help you so that you take the opportunity to push the boundaries a little bit. So
absolutely. And those groups welcome you saying, help me, guide me, show me, teach me. You know what I'm saying? When you approach people like that, it completely removes the offense. Yeah. Because I think that people are hesitant. You don't want to offend people. That's the society we live in today. There's this PC world where it's just kind of like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to appear to know it all. I don't want to, you know, or I might not even venture to try or take that on because I don't know. That's better for someone else to do that. And to your point, Melissa, look at what happened when you took a chance, you did what you thought to do, and then you said, please give me feedback to let me know that this is actually hitting the mark. Because isn't that what you would do for any project, regardless of whether this had anything to do with race? You would want your work to reflect the audience that it's supposed to reach, right?
Yeah.
I mean, as marketers, that's what we do.
It's my proudest piece that I've ever done. But like, it was just, I had to approach it with that, like, I think this is okay. And I'm pushing the boundaries. And if you think about it, it is so much better to like screw something up and have the opportunity to fix it and to make a statement in your work than to just sit on the backgrounds because you're too scared to ever make us. It's better to say, I always said that, like when I was grieving once, I was like, it's better to say the wrong thing than to say nothing at all.
Yes.
You know, and I think
because people assume when you don't say anything, they'll fill in for you.
They assume that you feel a certain way or don't feel a certain way. So it's much better to put yourself out there. And that's where all the growth happens as a designer, as a person, as a, you know, creative. So
as a society, that's where growth happens. When we start to talk about what we think, what we feel, where we're coming from, how do you feel about what I said or what happened, that's when we start to open up the lines of communication. And that's when we start to tell more authentic stories and have more authentic visuals that represent that, right? With the opera, being able to have that checked against the man who wrote this thing. I mean, if there's anyone to speak to whether or not this visual represents it, you go straight to the source.
I mean, I was hoping I'd start out with somebody a little bit less, you know, intimidating, but
kudos to the opera for not saying, oh, we got this, let's make the decision. They said, let's,
you know, like, so that's a good idea. Let's, you know, show it to to a handful of people and make sure. So
Sure.
it was
And
great.
that's credit to anyone. If you're working for someone or working for yourself,
Yeah.
there's all the fails, all the people who have been canceled, all that stuff. I'm telling you, probably 95% of those people worked in a vacuum. You thought in a vacuum, you posted in a vacuum, you know what I'm saying? Like none of that was ran by somebody. And if it was, it wasn't the target, right?
Mhm.
So like to ensure that it's going to hit the mark or make an impact or what have you, to ensure that it's not just something that you thought sounded good in the strategic plan, build into your plan, vetting it by the groups that you want to interact with. Because like you can see here in the metro parks, you know, one of their goals is to ensure that the needs of diverse members of the community are represented in all of their programming decisions. So it's not, we're just going to put on ethnic stuff at the park. We're going to have ethnic people at the conference table when we think of things to do for the community. You know what I'm saying? Having it, diversity in our creative space in our industry doesn't look like just more designers, doesn't look like just more people of color in ads. It looks like more owners
Decision makers.
of that are diverse. It looks like more decision makers and board members are diverse, because that is what is going to get that's the trickle down that you were talking about before. It starts up here. You know, if the opera said, we got this, we don't need anybody else telling us what's going on, we got a handle on diversity,
Yeah.
they would never be achieving it. We'll talk about them in a second, but they're creating experiences. Metro Parks is creating opportunities, should I say, for people to be at the decision-making point. And then that will translate into programming that actually will reach people because they now really know what the people need and want.
Yeah.
You know?
That
Anyone else?
segue
Anyone
for the
from
next
the
one, but yeah.
Okay. I was going to say we're going to open it up to questions and thinking about this, but some questions to think about and maybe we could discuss for just a moment. If your team is or audience is not diverse currently, think about who's missing. When you're thinking about your target audiences, there's normally like a main audience, the middle of the target, but in any target, there are rings around that middle point, right? So there are also other levels outside of that target who might fit in with your audience. They might either be interested in what you have going on already. Maybe they would be if they knew about it, but don't. Perhaps they are in a group that does solicit your services or use what you got going on, but they haven't been directly communicated with. So whoever that is in your target client base, they probably should be represented in your decision-making process or your internal conversations somehow. And that doesn't necessarily always have to look like a hire of somebody. You can consult with another group that has something to do with the audience that you want to reach. You could bring somebody in just for a focus group or just to attend one meeting or just to speak on whatever it is that they know about that target audience so that you can become educated about it without having to make so much of a financial commitment right off the bat. These larger organizations have the ability to bring in a hire or bring in somebody that's going to be totally over diversity, but smaller companies might not have the resources to do that. So you can still interact with those groups, and I'm sure that those groups would welcome to give the feedback if you just ask. Also, how you can turn your, how can your work environment adjust to nurture new hires or celebrate unique qualities? So let's say that you do diversify your employer base or even your client base. So I'll use myself as an example. Like I work at ProMedica in our corporate office, right? And, you know, you walk in and everyone kind of looks the same, right? I mean, there is a lack of diversity in our organization. Are we taking intentional steps now to work towards doing something about that? Yes. Is it a slow process? Yes. So when I walk into a meeting, depending upon what the meeting is, I'm probably the only person of color that's there. If I go to a board meeting, especially, I might be the only woman there. So we have women, especially people of color, especially have a lot of experience in corporate world with finding yourself in those types of situations, right? knowing what that feels like should give you a good idea of how to do things differently to make it so that it doesn't feel like that for the next person. So think about what you want to experience at work differently, what you would want to experience in your client interactions differently, and then start to begin to think of practical ways to implement that. Now that we're in the midst of actually putting plan into action as far as diversity, they're forming employee resource groups. So you have a Black employee resource group, a Hispanic, LGBTQ plus community group. So the people in our organization that look like us, we get to meet them now. We get to talk to them now. We get to have a safe space for us to be able to talk about things that we experience collectively as this group organization that is not made up of people that look like us. That's been a big help to see that focus there. So think about that as well. And then once you think about that and put that into words, you can start to form language for your strategic plan. Did anyone have any questions or comments about the first method?
Or examples or things that you've seen?
And that's okay if you don't.
No,
we'll move on
we
to the
talked
next
about
one. We
you.
just want to give you an opportunity.
I'll go.
Yay.
Yeah.
So, and I know Liz is on too, so hopefully I didn't steal hers, but I started working for Madhouse in August. And what I really liked, while we strive to be more diverse, is that they've taken the initiative to set up quarterly meetings with Candace Harrison, who provides, consultation and recommendations. And we have like this safe space where we'll meet and talk through things. And I think that's one way, like you said, even if those people aren't in the room yet, we can start getting into that mindset so that when we can get them in the room, we're more educated and, can provide a better environment instead of just being like, hi, what do you want from us? We kind of have a little background. So I was impressed that they made that initiative and continued to do that. So
Very
one
good.
way is bringing in I think if you bring in a consultant to just talk through it, and people ask awkward questions, it's really safe space where we can be like, okay, and weigh some of that out so that we can make it a more welcoming environment.
Nice. That makes a big difference to have an outside voice come in and help to sort through what you're thinking about and have questions about. Sure. Liz, did you have something? They both work for Madhouse, so
Yeah.
Right.
maybe she was
Yes.
going to say the
Okay.
same
Probably
thing.
just said everything.
I stole it. Sorry.
Well, I think
Yeah,
Liz is
that's all
also
right.
on vacation, so the fact that she even called in is pretty impressive.
I know. We're like
I don't know.
Mosaic committee members being committed.
Right.
Okay, so let's move right along because
I kind of touched on some of these next ones. Let me find my little arrow. Here we go.
Okay, so tactic 2, using the public to help identify your barriers. So we kind of talked about this a little bit. There's a good segue into, I want to show Toledo Museum of Art's tactics. So they did an official partnership with the Ability Center. And I think that this was a good example because, again, here is a group in the community already doing the work, already communicating with this group that the museum wants to continue to reach and further engage with, but there are barriers there, barriers that the museum probably didn't even realize were there. The partnership with the Ability Center gives them a perspective that is very knowledgeable about this group that can consult with them. And out of this partnership, they're creating a new position at the museum specifically geared towards making sure that accessibility is forefront in their offerings. So that was an example of an official way that they're putting that and making that a priority. Next is the opera. So we talked about this on several accounts, but this is one in particular that I wanted to focus on, their View Then Voice series. So they basically were like, hey, if you haven't been to the opera ever before, sign up, tell us that. And if you go to the opera, watch it, tell us about it, we'll pay you. Yeah. I participated in this personally, and it really was a good experience. The room, the diversity definitely was there. You had people of color, both genders. You had the people who had never even thought that they would ever go to an opera. And then you had some people who, yeah, I like musicals, things like that, but I've never been to the Toledo Opera before. And the discussion from the focus group, I heard Alyssa say several times, wow, I never even thought of that, or she kind of never even knew that people felt that way about the opera, so this is a testament that they kind of had an idea a little bit, but that focus group with the community really opened up their understanding about how people perceived the opera. So they weren't just going by, their own personal opinions. They were getting it direct from the community. And those suggestions are helping them to expand their the types of operas that they bring and the places where they're advertising and the community discussion where they're doing the conversations before the opera show. And, it's really starting to, I have interacted with the Toledo Opera more times in 2021 than in my entire life, but they're being very purposeful with making sure that they're implementing what the feedback they're getting from the community.
Yeah, I think I've worked with the opera for like 10, 11 years now. So I think the museum here is a great example too. It's like they'll do their classics, they'll do the big hits, or they'll do the La Traviatas that are like, the like most famous operas. But then each season, and museum does this as well with a lot of their larger exhibits, their play exhibit and their like Egyptian mummies, they'll bring in like more or less traditional pieces, more modern, contemporary pieces. That play one at the Toledo Museum of Art was just like, it was just like a playhouse in the middle of the museum. It was fantastic.
Nice.
So they're really trying to reach out to a whole new target market, which it's been so cool to sort of see the next generation become more involved, as well as, a much more diverse audience. So it's a pretty cool way for them to do that. So
yes, I mean, most of our cultural things here are just they're completely open and available. And even though Toledo is kind of a small town, there are still so many people who have never experienced those things. So there's no such thing as there's no such thing as running out of an untapped audience. There's always an untapped audience somewhere, right? And so these institutions who have historically probably had a lot of things that were along the same lines are now bringing in things that, an opera about police brutality, never heard of that before in my entire life, right? When I think of opera, I think about Italian stories from like a million years ago, right? But they're bringing it into contemporary day because that's what society is calling for. That's what people are calling for. If you want a new generation of people, if you want a new audience, you got to bring something new to the table. Getting feedback from the public about what they want will help to answer some of those questions that you might still have rolling around in your mind and not know the answers to.
Yeah. We only got 15 minutes, so we need to keep it moving. But yeah, we're so lucky in Toledo to have like the art museum and like in the opera and the symphony. I mean, we've got some like world renowned like art organizations here. So we really
but to your point, and bringing it down to the smaller, and when I say smaller, just in size, company wise or what have you, bringing that to those levels. It's not just that the art museum and the opera can do that. Of course, you can do that on your own personal level as well, right? So like, customer feedback is important and relevant, and regardless of what you got going on, right? So if you're a mid-sized company or you're a freelancer, what have you, asking people how they see you, how they perceive you, what they're looking for, how they like to communicate, what they want to see and hear from you is paramount to growth in general. Consider putting some things related to diversity or expanding your horizons. Pose that question in your surveys to people and see what happens. Here in your untapped audiences, people that might be engaging with you, but maybe they're not particularly your target. Who are those people and where are they located so that you can start to interact with them? And then, like we were saying before with the strategic plan as well, you can identify where those people are in the community and the organizations that are talking to those groups already and form partnerships there. And then I pulled this kind of from the opera's example, but how can you give your audience an exclusive experience with you for their time? So we've been putting at the forefront of our ideas for Mosaic within AAF is how can we give before we get, or how can we give before we ask someone for something? And that has helped to shape our approach with untapped audiences. So for example, in the Mosaic Awards this year, we were, instead of asking someone to come and submit for an award, we reached out to them and said, hey, we see that you did this. And that would be excellent. That qualifies you for the award. Consider nominating yourself. People were excited to just get that email that said, hey, we see that you're doing something really great and that you should be awarded for it. So consider the ways that you can reach out to that audience and then maybe give them something that might not even really cost you anything or too much, so that they can feel that they're receiving something for their time and effort that they've spent with you. And we got 4 minutes, but we're gonna go as fast as we can unless someone has any feedback.
You can still interrupt us if you have a question or like a story or something though. So don't feel strapped for time.
And I think that this is good because we had 4 tactics. We're not going to get to all 4.
No.
We might do another one of these to continue the conversation. But we welcome any feedback. So, and stop me if you need to. And then providing a platform for the underserved. One of the things that we saw a lot of these organizations do is using their spaces, their availability, their resources to provide environments for people to share their story or tell their message. So Owens collaborated with the Toledo Black Artists Coalition and put on, can't remember what the first name was, but it was Solidarity in the Age of something. I can't remember what the exact name of the exhibit was, but they allowed them to come in and display art that related to Black Lives Matter, the racial tension going on. This was a platform. Now, these artists would have found somewhere to do this, but Owens already has this beautiful gallery space, and they also have in their strategic plan that they're going to start to cultivate relationships with other organizations and what have you. So this was just a great marriage between what they intended to do and the spaces and resources they had available. And then the library is also doing the same thing. Their initiative is called The Big Idea. And so they're using their spaces to be able to offer movie and film screenings, art activities for the kids, to be able to have lecture series and things like that. Excuse me. To be able to bring in other authors, to be able to come in and talk about their works relating racial inequality. Same thing for Women's History Month. They're doing a lot of different activities and using their libraries to be able to push those initiatives out. So think about what you have at your disposal. Mm-hmm. Does your organization have some sort of space that could be used to house an event? Do you have a social media platform with lots of followers that someone might want to be able to interact with in order to, get their message out or tell their story? Do you have creative works that you can, or a creative company or business where your entire job is creating visuals for different things and causes that you could use to help someone to promote their efforts? We have so much at our disposal, our networks, our resources, our skills and talents, our physical spaces, all of those can be offered, used, partnered, collaborated with in order to further tell a story and move forward.
Yeah.
Anyone, and Melissa included.
Well, I have a good example, and she's on the phone now. So my friend Katie, she's on the phone. She works for Bittersweet Farms. And it's this amazing organization that I've been involved with that it's like adults with autism, residents, participants, and they have an amazing CSA program. They've got a ridiculously talented creative arts program. So they do all these wonderful pieces that are displayed at different galleries. And it's a great opportunity to show the talent that these autistic artists have and like display them for other people to learn more about Bittersweet, to learn more about like all the gifts that these folks have to give. And it's Perfect. Just, it's been so cool to sort of watch, Katie and Julie and all their efforts get those out in the community and see people learn about all the great stuff that they do. So yes, that's a wonderful example again of just pushing you know, pushing these wonderful programs that highlight people of different abilities and makeup. So
Yes,
kudos
Unruly
to Katie
Arts
and all her
is
hard work.
another too that does that. And I think that like to think about what you have, also think about what you're interested in, because you'll be way more passionate, open, and probably a little bit more fervent in pursuing something that marries your personal desires with other groups that are doing the same thing, but not like you. You know, so if you think about, you know, I love art. That's one of the ways that I can tap into other groups and be able to do a collaboration. But some people like to sew and knit. Some people like to produce music. Some people like to dance. Some people like to, you know, they might have a affinity for a certain thing in particular. And there's no one group that has a makeup of just the same type of person. If it's related to some sort of action, activity, or whatever that everyone in the group likes, you're going to get a mix of people and a mix of perspectives. So you can use those resources that you have at your disposal and open those up to a variety of people that share your same interests, automatically creating diversity right there without even really trying. I think that's the other thing too, is people are looking for ways to be authentic about this, right? We don't want to bring people in just because we never talked to you and now society says we got to talk to you, so come over here. You know what I'm saying? It should be related to something that you already care about, right? So whatever that is, there are other people that are not exactly look like you or where you're from or whatever that like that same thing. Use that as a common ground to reach out to them. And this might be in some of the brainstorm on the next slide already.
That's my cue. Hang on. There we go.
That's your cue. So this is basically what I was saying. How can you open up what you have to other people? And how can you keep the relationship going? You know, so once you have an event or once you've done an initial conversation or meeting with somebody, before you leave that meeting, think about how it can go on. Either when is our next meeting, or how can we introduce a new person to the group, or how can we remain beneficial? How can this be an annual thing? How can we talk to other people? Like it wasn't just the opera saying, hey, here's some new people that have seen the opera, but now they're taking that feedback and saying, okay, every month or every couple months, we're going to do this talk before the opera that talks to different people in the community about it and what have you. That keeps the conversation going. So how can you, once you form those partnerships, make sure that it remains ongoing in the future and be mutually beneficial? You know, if you're just giving and not getting anything in return, that's charity. So instead of charity, you want to start to form collaboration between people. That means that you benefit as well. And if you both get to the decision-making table and the brainstorming table and think about how you could both benefit, that of course is going to make that more lucrative for everyone involved. That's a good note too, especially if you're in a corporate environment, because most of the time it's like, how does this affect the bottom line? Or how does this really get us to where we want to go? And everything that you do should really be benefiting both companies almost equally.
Yeah. This one's a little trickier, especially with the whole like last few years, but hopefully as things start to
you know what, I wouldn't
you
say
can still
that.
reach out to people, but like the space thing of like hosting,
oh yes,
can be a little tricky, but we're getting there. Things are, knock on all the wood, but
sure.
But yeah, there's
the in-person pandemic issue has posed a roadblock, and I think that's good to note. However, it's opened up the virtual space so much more that I think that right now is a time where we could actually get the connections. You're so much more, there's probably more of a chance where you can get to a decision maker or you can get to a bigger name because they don't have this hectic in-person schedule, to at least be able to start the appreciation. I'm sorry, start the, I said appreciate because I saw that. Start the conversation about moving forward or connecting in a different way when things do open up. So now is a good planning time, a good cultivating relationship time, because before that was a little harder to do because people were so hectic, but now we have a little bit of breathing room there.
Totally.
I think we might get through this. So tactic 4.
Okay. This is a big one.
Representing diverse groups in your creative. We touched on this a couple of times throughout. But I think that this is a really good one, because in addition to connecting with different groups, affinity groups and all that from your personal likes and preferences and things that you're drawn towards, you can also use that in your professional creative works as well. So BCAN has a Black History Month series that they do. I have been featured in that. They're going around to different professionals in the community, and they interview them. They talk about their job, what they do. It also helps to introduce students and kids to those professions. They're able to see somebody that looks like them, and that's inspiration for them to be able to pursue careers. I think that they did kind of focus on creative space in the creative industries, but whatever industry you're in, that's an excellent way to be able to reach people. If you're producing something, for example, Lead from the Front, the podcast series, gentleman named Mike Purdue is producing, and he interviews various people in their professions. It introduces the community to them and their businesses. They get to tell their stories. They allow discussion and questions. Everyone wins. You know, him being able to provide a platform through his resources gives them an opportunity, but that also promotes his show as well. So creating win-win-win situations, I think, is really important and easy to do once you're in charge of the creative. And then Diamond in the Rough. So this was a good one that we actually researched and found. This gentleman creates a comic strip for the LGBTQ plus community. This particular one that he's created, Diamond in the Rough, is about this young gentleman who is discovering that he's gay. And he's going from, you know, initial feelings and interactions with people to, through all his inner thoughts, feelings, communications with people, a lot of things that people in that community probably have experienced. I've personally never seen a comic strip about it, but he decided that he was going to take his platform and he was going to dedicate it towards awareness and talking about and providing a dialogue, a place to start conversation surrounding the subject. And so think about what you have control over. What do you make? What do you produce? How can you then implement diversity or be able to tell someone's story there? And me personally, at work, a lot of times the decision of what vendors we use or what photo ends up in the creative, similar to Melissa's story, a lot of that falls on my personal decision. So whenever I get the opportunity, I'm throwing some diversity in there. I'm using a person of color. I'm choosing somebody who I know has the capability or the capacity to be able to handle work from us and normally wouldn't get the invitation. And to be purposeful about that is a step in the right direction all the time. Questions here are brainstorming.
Yeah, I actually do that a lot too. We've had this conversation a few times. Like I do a lot of ads for a national burger chain. And since just working with Mosaic and having these conversations on a more regular, if I am looking for like a hand holding a gift card or whatever, and I just put, you know, hand, white background kind of thing, I'm going to get a lot of white dude hands. So I purposefully like really think about that when I'm choosing those things. It's like I've used the same gender, same age type, whatever. Like now it's like, okay, we're doing a veteran's hand and I need a hand to Photoshop a burger onto. Like I am going to use like the hand of a woman veteran who happens to be, you know, a Black woman. So it's really, and I think it just makes a way cooler Instagram feed, a way cooler story for them to be showing all these different people that obviously already like shop there.
Yes.
And then on the alternate story, one of you guys had said something about a commercial or something where of course the one single, a mom happened to be a mom of color. So when I was doing like the United Way's annual report last year, I needed a dad reading to a kid and I needed a mom struggling like with groceries. Like I needed stock photos. So I specifically was just like, I'm going to find a white mom who's struggling. I'm going to find a Black dad reading to his kids. And it was just like, they're just tiny little changes, but by not feeding into the stereotypes that I've gone through, like it's my one little, you know, and it's like not necessarily a pat on my back. It's a, why the hell haven't you been doing this for the last 10 years, Melissa? Like, why is this just now
the light bulb is turning on.
Yeah,
Your perspective is
So-
shifted a little bit. And to not have it just be black and white and that's all, you know, I'm pushing myself because of course I'm Black. So I'm coming from a Black perspective. I notice when Black isn't there. Your audiences, whoever they are, they notice when they don't see themselves.
Yeah.
Just flat out. That is the truth.
And this was interesting. I just read this today from like a little blurb from the Gender Institute of Gender Media. It said 54% of consumers don't feel culturally represented in advertising. Only 1.1% of online ads represent persons with disability, and only 0.3% of online ads include LGBTQ plus target groups. But with the more diverse campaigns, it's obviously saying more about your brand than just the one person that might be, you know, buying your product. They say 90% of those ads have higher recall rates because you're feeding into all these like other people that are like, finally, I'm seen and I'm heard. So it makes a huge difference to just really make sure you're representing everybody instead of just folks in your house that look like you.
And there's so many, like I said, there's so many untapped audiences, but there's so many people, especially now, who are making decisions based on that. I saw myself in that. I see that they are now doing this. I see that they are now reaching out to or representing us. I want to be associated with a company who is sensitive to that. And I'm gonna tell you, you would think that in a lot of instances where a person like has to go here, a hospital, a doctor's office, or whatever, that sort of thing, that people would be like, well, I'm more concerned about the quality of care, this and other. People are factoring in how you interact with groups outside of yourself or interact with all groups. People are looking at that and making decisions about buying, spending, working with, whatever, on those sorts of things. It's not this, well, maybe if they one day get to it, I'll start with them now. No, people are outright in the initial stages of decision making, looking for those cues about how they're seeing themselves or where they're seeing themselves. And so being cognizant of that, just like you said, Melissa, just even taking a pause.
Yeah.
Just for a second, whatever you're working on, just pause for a second and think, who's missing?
Yeah.
You know, or who would this reach? Or how could this reach somebody differently? Or have we considered everybody that should be a part of our target audience? Researching to see how many people outside of the audience you think is your target audience are using your product or service, or might be in need of design or what have you. Being cognizant of that is starting to become like a requirement, like being sensitive to the cultural makeup is becoming just as important as knowing or needing to know the design skills, you know, or whatever the skills needed to do your job. So just keeping all that in mind, I think that there was one last slide about the questions, and I think that we touched on that. But at the end of the day, thinking about your experiences, what have you read, heard, seen that have opened your eyes to something? Now Melissa's making different choices when she's choosing stock photos, but it was because she experienced something that opened her eyes to thinking differently, right? Think about the aha moments or the light bulbs that have gone off for you over the past couple years since we've been experiencing these shifts. What made it turn on for you? How can you further that same activity, or tell that same story, or further that storytelling, so that the next group of people can be influenced? However that hit you and moved you, think about how you can replicate that thing so that you can move others. Anyone have anything to add or would like to interject?
We talk a lot, us too. Sorry.
I know. I hope it's because we're entertaining and not because you can't get a word in edgewise.
It's because you're entertaining. Don't worry.
Oh, okay.
We also have we were chatting while you were talking, and we may have some committee members.
Good.
So, Al, if you want to snag those names, and we have their emails from the registration. So.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah,
I am so glad. And look, it's already working. We decided to open up and have a conversation, and now we're getting some different people coming to the table. So proves that we were right.
this mosaic committee has like changed you know, when I was a design student back in the day, I was like, is this really what I want to do? Like, am I really making a difference, you know, deciding whether this corporation's logo is blue or green? Like, I don't know, you know, and then I found my little ways, but like the last few years, it's just given so much more, like literally I'm just making a few stock photography changes or actually, you know what, I should also send these links to you guys in the follow-up, because I was also the other day like Googling like what are like all the old white like graphic designers I studied in like school, and I looked up like all the like historically Black graphic designers, and I'm looking at these pieces like I know this work and I love these people, but I had no idea. Like I'm pulling some inspiration from some of those brilliant minds. So, you know, it's definitely changed it, and it's brought this whole other level of like design and just how I look at the world to things that it's like I'm so grateful for. So all that's been just even from my collaboration with Mosaic, I think just really lit that fire. So
that's where it starts.
Deciding
the change that we want to see in this country starts with doing just what you just did.
Small changes, people.
Small little changes. That's what gets us to our ultimate goal.
It makes better work, man. It really does.
Better work, better world.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you all for joining us. I really hope that you all found this valuable to be able to have this conversation, to look at some tactics that are being put into practical use and are making a difference in our creative communities. Thank you for joining us. I really encourage you all to continue to stay following the AAF and what we're doing, moving the needle. We have a wonderful event coming up March 10th. Our Addies awards are coming up. And so we just hope that you all will join us again and be able to see all of the different creatives around town who are doing exceptional work in our industry. And then we will continue to have Mosaic conversations. Again, it was said in the chat, but we are open to creative minds who would like to be a part of the diversity and inclusion efforts that we're doing at Mosaic and with the AAF. So please consider reaching out to us. We will follow up this conversation with an email to all people who registered with links to all of the resources that we've talked about today and Melissa's resources as well that she just mentioned, and upcoming events moving forward. Unless anyone has anything else, that's all we have for you today. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your day and week. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.